The pain in my stomach was unbearable. Like at first I thought, I don't know, maybe it's just like some weird gas pain or something, you know? So I went to bed, but it got worse and worse, and like this stabbing pain in my stomach. My mind starts to spiral. I'm like, oh, all right, maybe it's like a ruptured appendix or pancreatitis or like whatever the hell it's called. And I am wincing in pain. Finally, I'm like, I've got to get this checked out. So my wife runs me to the hospital in the middle of the night, and we're there for hours. Scans, lab work, all the stuff. And finally the doctor walks in. He says, well, the results are back, and well, you are constipated. What the constipated? Are you high? Like, I've been constipated before, and this is not what constipation feels like. And he sort of laughed and said, like, yeah, more of a IBS type constipation. And like, dude, I'm so embarrassed. I'm a grown ass man in this hospital bed, all but crying because I can't poop. Like, so then he asks, well, what do you do for work? Which I felt like was a really random question. I said, I own 2 companies, and I'm, trying to scale the one right now to exit. And then I have this, I got that, all these things, whatever. And he sort of smiled knowingly and said, yeah, so my unofficial diagnosis would be that you are chronically stressed. Well, that stress put me in the hospital. And this was just one example of the physical ailments I faced in my late 20s and early 30s while I was building my companies. And it turns out they were all just physical signs of being chronically stressed and burning out. I just didn't know it at the time. So in this video, I want to share 2 additional stories from that same period of my life. Different symptoms, different diagnoses, same root cause. Because this wasn't a one-off situation. This was a pattern that I just didn't recognize for a very long time. So, all right, we just talked about the IBS stuff, right? Which is irritable bowel syndrome for the record. And, those continued to tear me up for a few years while I was working on getting that fixed up. I took some medication. I got, scoped from both ends. And it would not be my last GI visit during those days. But the next issue, I want to take you from my stomach to my eyes. Because there was a long stretch of time where I struggled with like vision issues and headaches, but not normal headaches, Like I remember working on my computer in my basement and just kind of going through these periods where I couldn't see. But it's not like when I don't wear glasses, can't see. It was like I could see, but my eyes, like they couldn't focus, or like they were crossed. Like it was really hard to explain, and it came with headaches, but like bad headaches, but they were there. And it was like, I was dizzy, but not dizzy. Again, it was really hard to explain. But whatever it was holding me back constantly. I could barely get any work done. Right? So eventually I'm like, all right, enough's enough. First thing I do is I check for mold and other types of toxins in the house, right? Because I'm like, it feels like I'm high or something. Like, I don't know. But nothing comes up. Nothing checks out. And then I'm like, all right, I guess I have to go to the doctor. So I go to the family doctor. He sends me to the eye doctor, take the vision test, do all these things. It comes back, prescription's unchanged. The eyeballs themselves look fine. So next up, I go to a neurologist, which takes months to get in, by the way. And the thought was maybe it's the brain, how it's processing the vision, something like that. And I get all these scans and tests. And again, everything looks good. And then they ask if I've ever seen a psychiatrist or have done psychotherapy. I'm like, wait, what? Oh, no, weird, but no. But hey, I'm desperate. So I go to the psychiatrist and they give me an ADHD test, which is like a questionnaire. Like, do you this, that? You just answer all the questions. And it says, yep, you have got ADHD. And then they said, here are some meds and good luck. And it was like, just happened so fast. I was like, oh, what the fuck? That was easy, And it was like, okay, well, now what? So they're saying that my vision issues and all this weird mental stuff is just ADHD, like whatever. So I start taking the pills. And at first, it's kind of incredible. Like I can work for hours and hours and hours. Don't get me wrong. My vision still isn't really working, but I was so cracked out, I could just like work anyways, But my head is actually hurting more, but I can work. So like I keep going. And eventually I realized like, all right, this isn't super sustainable. And even though I'm working more, I'm still not very productive, right? I'm just doing a whole lot of nothing faster and just feeling cracked out all day. And then I crash at night, same vision issues, same headaches. Actually, the headaches are worse. And now my blood pressure is climbing through the roof because of the ADHD meds on top of the stress. And after nearly 2 years of chasing this, I just gave up. I was like, all right, well, it is what it is. This is what life is going to be like for me. So just suck it up. And I continued just popping meds for a few years and living a very unsustainable lifestyle that was not very healthy, right? And then fast forward a little while later, and I end up going to a chiropractor for a totally unrelated incident. I like tweaked my back moving furniture or some dumb shit, right? And listen, I know chiropractors, we got mixed reviews on those guys, right? But I actually found one that seemed decent, and I was desperate for relief from my back. And he starts evaluating, and then he's doing like a general evaluation, and vision stuff comes up. And I'm like, yeah, I actually have these, vision things and like kind of focus issues. And he's completely unsurprised by it. Like he's not fazed at all. He's just like, yeah, okay, makes sense. I'm like, oh, that's weird. And then he grabs my neck, like whatever the hell this stuff is, like these little giblets up front. He grabs it. Oh, dude, I'm like yelping. I'm like, whoa, what the? And it turns out that all this shit was just super tight and compressed. I had this other stuff going on in my neck. And yeah, I'm just like, what the hell is that? And he's like, do you work on a computer a lot? Well, yeah, all day, you know? And then he says, well, what do you do for work? I tell him I own a couple companies, you know, I do digital marketing, I do some software stuff. And if I'm not sitting, I'm probably not making any money. He then asks, is your job stressful? And I'm like, well, yeah. Obviously, everyone's job is fucking stressful, you know? And I start explaining all the things going on. And he explains that stress loads up physically in a lot of people in their neck and upper traps. You store stress. And then on top of that, I have just the posture of sitting on the computer and doing all that stuff all day, which, you know, I've read about before, but I was pretty sure I was ergonomically correct. But he said between the two, it's really a no-brainer. So I started going twice a week, and it was like for a few months, basically, he said, to do it because it was so bad. And normally, I would never have seen that through, right? I would have just gone a few times until my major back injury was feeling better, and I was like, all right, peace, I'm back at it. But I was like, if this will work, I'll do it. And wouldn't you believe it? Dude, my vision actually clears up. All of that chasing of specialists, neurologists, psychiatrists, all that stuff. And again, it was just my body screaming at me before my mind figured out what was going on. So now I have to do posture work, I do the neck mobility, a neck pillow. Like first I have to manage the physical symptoms that are generated from the stress that I carry, essentially. And then on top of that, just continuing to work on the posture. Because even if you have good posture, if you're working on a computer all day long, you're still gonna run into issues. Like it doesn't matter. It's still not a natural position for a human to be in for 8, 9, 10, 12 hours a day. You know what I mean? So yeah, so I start doing those things, right? Yeah, so my vision issues were actually because of stress and because of posture. Go figure. And for the last story I want to talk to you about is I want to dig deeper into the ADHD and the mental health side of this. And you might see me say like ADHD, and I don't mean that to say it's not like a real condition. I mean it because my own experience was so mixed with it, you know? Because I definitely relate to certain symptoms of ADHD. But a lot of people I know do as well, you know? And I think modern day life just gives everyone ADHD. Like I have so many easy ways to stay distracted and just bounce between things or just dive really deep on a certain thing. But perhaps I have some of that wiring. But here is the interesting thing that I found. One of the issues, like for the vision, were the ADHD meds, which maybe all cracked out. We talked about that already. And it was jacking up my blood pressure. But I was like, all right, I need to figure this out because my vision's better. I can focus. I'm not constipated, but I still I'm having issues with like productivity or motivation or something. Like, I don't know. I'm just so spent at this point. So I decide I got to figure this out. And I go and I find a psychiatrist. I do all this research to find a really respected one. They go through the works, man. I was really impressed. Like we did genetic testing, lab work, long conversations, all the things. And she says, listen, I see some of the ADHD type traits, right? But I'm not entirely sold that that's what's going on entirely. And she said that she sees a little bit of anxiety, sure, some depression types of things, but like she was hesitant to like say that is what was going on, any one of those things. And then she asked how long I struggled with them and all that. And I said, you know, I guess as a child, maybe I did, you know, in school, but like I procrastinated and stuff. I did fine enough in schools. I don't know, maybe that was kind of like those ADHD type symptoms. And then I'm like trying to reflect back on my earlier adulthood. And I'm like, you know, when I was younger and I was just doing like this heavy labor jobs, right? Or even when I was doing like sales, like car sales and those kinds of things. I never felt held back by the ADHD. And when I was in the military, like during my active duty time or basic training, tech school, that kind of stuff, I had no noticeable ADHD symptoms like at all, like none. Like my acne went away and like I just felt more clear than ever before in my life. So like how does ADHD just comes and goes? Like that doesn't feel like it makes any sense. So then she asked me to compare that life to my current one and I walk her through it, you know, like, all right, in the military, I'd wake up, get yelled at maybe if it was basic training, I'd go where they told me to go, I'd eat what I was told to eat, I'd learn what they told me to learn, and I'd go to bed and just do it again, you know, maybe hang out with friends if it was after basic training. And now I, you know, wake up early, take stimulants, work for 12 hours a day, remodel my house, be present for my wife, have a kid, start another company, deal with bad hires, court issues with that accountant that was just stealing money from us, which pisses me off. But all of this was while I was still trying to do college part-time and I was in the military reserves. So yeah, you know, I got to fix the sales, do the systems, the clients. She just looks at me and she's like, all right, I would diagnose you as just having a lot going on and having a stressful life. She's like, is there ADHD? Yeah, maybe. Anxiety? Sure. Depression? Yes. But it is warranted based off the environment you're in. And then she asked if there's a way for me to just reduce that load. And I'm like, no, not really. Like I feel kind of stuck. She said, listen, we can treat the symptoms and that's what we would be doing, but we're not treating the cause, just to make sure we're clear. And that stuck with me because most doctors don't explain that shit, right? They just, here's your pills, peace. Well, actually, I shouldn't say most doctors. Most of the doctors I've worked with up until that point would have just said, here's your pills, peace, because I only have 10 minutes to see you or whatever. But she explained it like, listen, is it a problem? It's a problem if the symptoms are affecting the quality of your life. That's up to you to decide. And then we can treat the symptoms essentially. But yeah, so like what I really had, it wasn't entirely, again, ADHD, it was burnout. It was this internal fire, if you would. And that was the moment I started asking like, all right, is all this shit worth it? You know, like I was brought up to like grind and be tough and work your ass off. And I worked my ass off so I wouldn't have such a shitty life like I did growing up as a kid or in my early 20s. And I think there's value in that. And sometimes you have to use shitty fuel to just get yourself out of the mud and get to the next level. But like at some point you have to decide what actually matters to you in this season of your life. And like before kids, I could just grind endlessly and recover. But after kids, not the same. Not if I want to be present the way I wanted to. So then I started thinking about like maybe I should just exit my businesses, you know, like I could just keep growing it, maybe make more money. But I was like, I don't know that it was worth it basically, you know? And I held on to them for a few more years and I just continued to struggle with burnout is what I now know is what was going on. It's stress and all of that. And then I ended up selling the companies and shortly thereafter, just like she said they would, a lot of those symptoms seemed to ease up. Now, other issues came up like identity stuff, purpose stuff, existential types of things, which I talk about in other videos. But I have zero doubt that chronic stress was completely destroying me and is quietly destroying a lot of people. And I believe that many people may not know that and they probably just don't have an easy solution to just alleviate the stress. And then it comes down to, all right, well then how do you manage the stress? Right? And how do we slowly make changes over time to improve your situation? Instead of, like most of us, we just numb ourselves with some form of tech, our phones, video games, something to just distract us so we don't have to feel the pain of the burnout and the stress. And, you know, like right now, just as an example, I'm working with a guy who's in his late 20s and he's starting a business. He started a business, he's scaling it, and he's telling me the story about how he was rushed to the ER with stabbing stomach pain. And he said it was the worst pain he's ever felt. And he's going on and going on. And I'm like, you are constipated. And he just looks at me like, wait, what? How do you know? Yeah, how did you know? And I'm like, yeah, well, you know. And then he mentions the weight gain, hair loss, chest pain. I'm like, oh yeah, dude, that totally comes with it, you know? Like, and I was kind of making light of it, but it's like, oh yeah, no, you totally, like, you're killing yourself slowly as you grow the business. Like, that's just kind of what happens. And again, it was kind of a joke, but kind of true. And I was like, yeah, we should probably start talking about stress awareness and just like management strategies of how can we mitigate some of these stressful things, because you can't just get rid of them all, but we have to figure out some sort of system to manage it, because otherwise it's just going to kill you, right? And honestly, I kind of feel like stress management should be a required class. So yeah, I don't know if this resonates with you or if you've had any issues with stress, burnout, those kinds of things. If you have, I'd love to hear about them in the comments. And if you liked that video, then I'd recommend checking out this video, because in here I talk about my addiction to sugar and what that taught me. Thanks again, and I will catch you guys on the path. Peace.